Hey everyone, welcome to the Bengals post-game show. I am Anthony Cosenza, and this show is courtesy of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, which is a show on the Cincy Jungle slate of podcasts, their channel, and part of the SB Nation network of podcasts. Thanks for joining us. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza. In case you have not heard, the Cincinnati Bengals got pretty dominated by the New England Patriots. Lost by 21 points, 34-13. And really, this may be one of the shortest post-game reaction shows that we have, because really the difference in the game was in quarterback play and in coaching. Stephen Undum says, hey, I actually get this live for once. Well, glad you're joining us, Stephen. Sorry there's not a better result to talk about, but glad you're able to join us regardless. And welcome all of you who are joining us either via the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel or Cincy Jungle's Facebook Live, the video chat there. We do these post-game reaction shows after every game on those platforms, and then the audio is available on one of our many different platforms that we offer the show, as well as on cincyjungle.com. But as I mentioned, Bengals lose to the Patriots at home 34-13. And really, this game was pretty competitive, pretty manageable. The Bengals were playing pretty decent football for close to two entire quarters, almost the entire first half. Then all of a sudden, Alex Erickson fumbles the ball on a punt that the Bengals, we're going to get the ball back, potentially do their 2-minute drill, try and get some points. At the time, it was a 10-10 tie, and all of a sudden there's a field goal right before the half. Patriots take the lead and never look back. Now, the big reason why they never looked back is because there were four Andy Dalton interceptions in the second half of the game alone. Andy Dalton only threw 8 passes in the first half. He was 7 of 8 in that first half, but they only had him throw 8 passes. They were running the ball very well throughout the first part of the game. Joe Mixon had over 100 yards by the time 2.5 quarters had elapsed. So he finished with 136, which was his second highest total of the year. So 2 great games back-to-back for Joe Mixon on the ground, almost 300 yards combined the past 2 weeks. But the Bengals were running the ball well. They were blocking pretty well up front. They blocked okay throughout the entire game. There were no sacks. Now, granted, Andy Dalton was getting the ball out quickly, and they were running the ball well. But, I mean, the offensive line wasn't really the issue today. It was poor throws by Andy Dalton. It were just a handful of reads and a handful of, where he was throwing the ball, not only where the passes were located, but where he was throwing the ball. Guys weren't open, and he still was forcing the ball. Now, you can look at giving up 34 points. Well, when your offense gives the ball away 5 times, your defense is going to collapse. They're going to get tired, and their will is going to break. That's just kind of how it goes in the NFL. So, you can get on the defense about allowing that many points, but really, again, another pick 6. So one of those touchdowns is not on the Bengals defense. And then, of course, they're put in bad positions. They held strong on that Alex Erickson fumble, which put them in a really bad position. They held them to a field goal, almost held them to another field goal, but on a 3rd and goal, Brady, worked his magic and did that. Look, this today, I mean, Tom Brady, you look at his stat lines, it's okay. It was a pretty good day by him, but really, he wasn't all that impressive. The Bengals were pressuring him, especially earlier in the game. They had 2 sacks on him in the first half, knocking him down frequently. Really, he had, I think 7 or 8 incompletions in the first half alone, which was kind of a lot for him. One of it, the first touchdown pass was really all done by James White. It was just a swing pass. So, kind of a workman-like day, I guess, for Tom Brady. Not a great day by him. Their defense was letting up a lot of yards on the ground, and Cincinnati just kept giving the ball away. Jeremy Gifford in the live Facebook, the defense played really well. I mean, if you actually watched the game and saw how the defense performed, especially in light of all those turnovers, they played pretty well. I love this quote here by Shelton Stowers. It was a game of two franchises going in completely opposite directions. Now, a lot of people could have predicted this result today because, the Patriots thrive on when their back is against the wall and people are counting them out. Brady thrives on that. Bill Belichick thrives on that. And that's where they're at after two straight losses and this videotaping scandal that came up this week. However, they looked very beatable today. They looked very beatable by a team that was hosting them that had only one win on the season. The Bengals had them against the ropes at certain points in the first half. They couldn't figure out how to stop the run. The Bengals were kind of dinking and dunking and completing necessary passes in the first half. And what they do, the Patriots, much like what the Steelers do when they play the Cincinnati Bengals, they wait for the Bengals to trip over their own 2 feet. That's what they do. And that's what they did today. And Cincinnati inevitably did it. Carl Fix, Andy Dalton cost the Bengals the game. Yeah. Weekly, I do a winners and losers post, and usually it's, a whole myriad of losers and only a couple of winners. Well, really, there weren't a lot of losers today for the Cincinnati Bengals. It was really the coaching and the quarterback play. And it was definitely the quarterback play more than the coaching. Now, Zach Taylor is not immune. I mean, if your team gives up 5 turnovers, whether that's strictly on the quarterback or not, that's a sign of undisciplined play. They weren't that bad on the penalties front, but they had some costly mistakes there. And you could look at a 4th and inches, 3rd and inches situation where Cincinnati, they run it up the gut twice, and they do so out of the shotgun formation when it's 4th and a football length. It just don't get cute. I know you're Joe Mixon's where you're getting the bulk of your yards, but in an inch, with about a foot to go, lining your running back up a handful of yards deep and handing him the ball off there to get not even a yard, that doesn't make sense. Just line your quarterback right under the center and shoot forward twice as the quarterback sneak. I don't really understand that one. Again, the Cincinnati Bengals scored just 13 points. The teens in terms of points has been a theme for the team this year. There's a lot of rhyming in that sentence. I apologize. But that has been a theme for the Bengals this year. They probably would have scored more points if they hung on to the football. If they didn't turn the ball over so frequently, they probably would have had one of their higher outputs against a good Patriots defense. But 4 second-half interceptions by Andy Dalton, the first half fumble by Alex Erickson, that's what it all amounted to. And this, I was getting here, and Chris Vick kind of, in the live Facebook kind of talked about it here. Tom Brady's a second-half quarterback. That's what Chris Vick said. Yes, and Bill Belichick is the master of adjusting, making halftime adjustments, and that's where you see the difference in today. Andy Dalton making a myriad of mistakes against a very good football team, and Bill Belichick making the adjustments, whereas Zach Taylor really did not. I'm going to share my screen and show you something here. And some of you know these stats already when it comes to Andy Dalton. Some of you may not. But this is just kind of a microcosm of Andy Dalton in big games. Now, this is just the playoffs, okay? This is just the playoffs. But 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions. Look at the rating, 57.8. Now, 12 sacks in these 4 games, not good. That's a big problem. Here's the other one: 4 fumbles, 2 of them lost, and he recovered 1 of his own. So you look in those 4 playoff games, you've got 8 turnovers and another 2 that were possible turnovers there. Completion percentage at 55.7%. Why I bring that up is because today was an example of why the Bengals need to move on from Andy Dalton. And this was a 1 p.m. game. This was the not the primetime thing, but this was a primetime team. And why part of the reason why the Bengals struggle in primetime is because now nobody plays very well, but the quarterback isn't playing well against the top teams, against in the crunch time venues and time slots. I don't want to pile on Andy Dalton. I know a lot of people, kind of myself and my co-host on our weekly show, John Sheeran, that we've been labeled as quote unquote Dalton haters. I've made no bones about the fact that I love Andy Dalton, the man. I've liked Andy Dalton, the quarterback, at times for the Cincinnati Bengals, and I want to see him win with this team. I have always wanted to see him win because he's a high character guy. And for the amount of criticism, he's largely stood up to it and said, I didn't play well. We didn't play well, whatever. You can't defend this kind of play today. 4 interceptions on your home field against the New England Patriots, staring down receivers, and not only staring them down, throwing the ball late, throwing the ball behind them, throws a ball. John Ross has a step. Granted, it's garbage time at this point. John Ross has a step on a guy in the fourth quarter. Dalton throws the ball late. It hangs up in the air. It gets intercepted. The 2 by Gilmore to Tyler Boyd, behind him, late and predictable. The pick 6 was a predictable play. It was one of those out routes that are dangerous, kind of a little out route, and Gilmore jumped it, to his credit. And those things happen. But 4 interception games from your supposed franchise quarterback against a quality opponent, that should not happen. That should not happen. And I bring these playoff stats up because this is a theme against against quality opponents for Andy Dalton. His stats against the Steelers and really the teams he has statistically played well against. We need to compile the stats to give you specifics, but really, he's played pretty well against the Ravens statistically, and those are largely because AJ Green has been playing in those games. And he's played at times well against the Browns. There have been basically today was his second worst game as a pro that I can remember. The first one was back in 2014 against the Browns, coincidentally, but this had to be a top 2 worst Andy Dalton performances, in his career. And then, of course, this is where we transition to what Devin K says in the live Facebook chat. That's why we're getting Joe, as in Joe Burrow. Anthony, it's beautiful. Maybe this is the time things actually change. Young coach and a guy wanting to pull us out of the rut. Well, it's been a hell of a weekend for Joe Burrow. He won the Heisman, and he did so by vote margins that were record-setting. And rightfully so. The guy threw close to 50 touchdowns, and I think he's got single-digit interceptions. I mean, we know the deal. Now the Cincinnati Bengals are set to have the number 1 overall pick still, and that's probably the guy they're going to take, especially with a performance like today. Now, looking around the league, the Giants beat the Miami Dolphins. So both of those teams have 3 wins, whereas the Cincinnati Bengals have 1 with 2 games left to play. Now the Cincinnati Bengals play the Miami Dolphins next week, and then they host the Browns in the finale in the final week. If the Bengals win just one of those games, they will get the one. If they go 1-1 the rest of the way out, they will have the number 1 overall pick. That's just kind of the reality. And a lot of people want Joe Burrow, and I think that's probably the route they are going to go and should go. Some people want Chase Young. Chase Young, it sounds like, may not even enter the draft this year. We will see what happens there. But today was the day that kind of all weekends when Andy Dalton could play poorly and have one of his worst historic professional performances. It's the weekend that Joe Burrow wins the Heisman. And everybody is looking at Joe Burrow. Everybody's looking at Andy Dalton. So, that's where this team is at. That's where this team is at. And really, it was a shame to see the body language of the Bengals change in such a drastic way today. The Bengals defense was flying around, making plays, hitting Tom Brady. Joe Mixon was putting forth effort as he has all year. And by the way, he's on pace now to get 1,000 yards, believe it or not, after his slow start and the atrocious blocking and the atrocious play calling at the beginning of the year. Lo and behold, they changed the scheme a little bit. They give him, carries, and here he is being very, productive. Now you can say, well, it doesn't matter. They still lost by 3 touchdowns. It doesn't matter. You got 130 yards. Well, yes and no. The game was very close by the time he was closing in on 100 yards. So, I mean, I don't think we can say, it's a waste or a waste of effort on his behalf. Andy Dalton gets another ball hit, he gets hit, the ball flutters out of his hand, and Joe Mixon, makes a heads up play and comes down with a reception to save a drive. That could have been interception number 5 of the day, or number 1. I think it would have been his first one. But, there's talent here, and unfortunately it's not being showcased well because the team, the most important facets of the team are not working. Andy Dalton and the coaching to some extent. The other thing, we're saying I'll be happy when Dalton's gone. I'm seeing all these comments, and this is a good thing. It is. I suppose it's a good thing for those, wanting to move on and the Bengals needing to make a definitive decision at quarterback. I think this is how you make that decision to move on, by witnessing a game like this by your quarterback against a quality opponent. That should tell you all you need to know. The other thing is trade value for Dalton. Now, this was maybe, some people thought when Dalton was reinserted into the lineup, this was maybe a thing where a lot of people felt like this was maybe an audition for Andy Dalton for other teams to be traded. And that's possible. But aside from a pretty good showing in his first start back when the Bengals beat the Jets, it's been a lot more of the same. It's been a lot more of the same, if not worse. And his trade value is, if anything, declining at this point. So, I see Zabu Goose Fraba saying 4th round maybe in our live YouTube chat. That's possible. You never know what happens in the spring. Teams get wacky. Teams get caught up in the free agency frenzy. They get caught up in all that. If the Bengals hang on to Dalton past free agency and into the draft, a team could, if they miss out on one of those quarterbacks, or they drafted a 2nd round guy or a 3rd round guy the year before that they want to give snaps to, but they want a bridge guy, that sort of thing. All of a sudden, a 3rd round pick may be feasible. I do not think anything higher than a 3rd round pick will be netted for Andy Dalton at this point. I just don't. And even that may be generous, but this is I've got a thought that I want to share before we get out of here. This is something I thought about as the game kind of wore on, and I'll get to that in just a second. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. This is the post-game reaction show courtesy of the Orange and Black Insider. This podcast and the reaction show are part of Cincy Jungle's podcast channel, which is within the SB Nation network. You can get all of the shows, the post-game reactions, our weekly show, a couple of other podcasts, Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk, Orange is the New Black. You can get all that stuff on the Cincy Jungle channel, and all of that stuff is on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. It's on Megaphone, iHeartRadio. All of our stuff is on YouTube, and you can get the stuff on CincyJungle.com. So the one thing I was thinking about and I'd be interested to not only hear read some of your comments here, but one of the things that I was thinking about as this game concluded today, a lot of people think that this year, and I think this is, and I'm one of them, and I think it's correct. I think a lot of people feel like this year may have exploited Zach Taylor, the play caller, or Zach Taylor's inexperience, because at times he has looked in over his head. There are times, the Bengals aren't scoring points, all that stuff. He gets a little bit of a pass because of the quarterback play at times and, the injuries and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's been an indictment there. And some people kind of say, well, his play calling has actually hindered Andy. And I think there's some validity to that opinion. My thought was, I almost wonder if it's the opposite. I almost wonder if Zach Taylor's offense is designed to actually be quite intricate. It's designed to do a lot of things and ask a lot of a quarterback. And simply put, he's had to either, I hate to use the term, but dumb it down or make it more vanilla than it actually is, or what he's asking of Andy Dalton in this system, he is not capable of producing within what's being asked. So what I'm saying is I almost wonder if this offensive-minded coach is actually exploiting what has been further hidden about Andy Dalton throughout the Marvin Lewis years. We've seen Andy Dalton get exploited against the good teams in the Marvin Lewis years and in the big games in the Marvin Lewis years, but he has put up career numbers. This is supposedly a more innovative, a more modern offense that Zach Taylor is bringing to the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm wondering if this is something that is actually exploiting further weaknesses of Andy Dalton, and today is part of the evidence of what I'm speaking of. Because Andy Dalton has traditionally been, for the most part, an 8-9 win on average guy, 20 to 30 touchdowns a year, and probably 10 to 15 interceptions a year. As it stands right now, with granted 3 games being benched, I believe he's got 11 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. This is by far his worst. This is looking like his worst statistical season as a quarterback. And yes, the offensive line was a mess at the beginning of the year. It's getting better, but it's still not great. But that's been a mess. Yes, he has missed A.J. Green. Yes, John Ross has been out of the lineup. I understand all of that. But I've kind of begun to think that this is something where, maybe, and this is maybe tinfoil hat talk, and maybe I got to break that out, but maybe as Zach Taylor was offered this job, he kind of made it known, well, I'll work with Andy, but at some point in the very near future, I want a new signal caller. Ownership kind of said, well, you're going to work with Andy. We've got him under contract. You're going to work with him for at least a year, if not 2 years, which was what was remaining on his contract when Zach Taylor took over the Bengals. And Zach kind of said, you know what? Fine. We'll work with it. Let's do it. And I almost wonder if he kind of said, I'm going to throw my playbook at him. I'm going to throw my system at him. I'm going to throw my scheme at him. And he's going to show all of us if he can sink or swim, which is ironic to say about a 9-year veteran. But, and this isn't to say Zach Taylor's been perfect on the year, because that's not the case. But I began wondering if this was something, if things like today, performances like that against the Rams, where, you're going, what you're asking yourself, what are these throws? What are these? Why are you trying to fit these in these windows that aren't there? And maybe it has something to do with the additional pressure this year on Andy Dalton, given that they finally drafted a guy to compete a little bit with him, and Ryan Finley. There's been a lot of Joe Burrow talk, and maybe he's kind of feeling the heat, and then he's forcing throws that he normally would not have done, knowing that the job was his and going forward. Maybe that was the case. But I just wonder if the weaknesses that we know and we knew about Andy Dalton are further being exploited based on what Zach Taylor's asking him in this new offense. And, it is what it is. Tom Vollen says 1-13. Yeah. There was someone else here that says, last 2 years, 7-23. Yeah, the Bengals, I believe the last, their last 16 games, they're 1-15, or 2-14, something like that. So Joseph Stopp says our back seven on defense are terrible. Well, I've actually seen quite a bit of improvement from Bates. Sean Williams has been a bit of a roller coaster this year after having his best year as a pro last year. So he's been a little bit of a question mark for me. William Jackson's been a little bit up and down. BW Webb to me is terrible. He has not played well. He has not been a good acquisition. I think, let me rephrase that. BW Webb is not a guy you want as a starting cornerback in this league. He's bounced around a lot. There's a lot of evidence to show you that he probably is not a starting cornerback in this league, an effective starter. He is a guy that is good as a number 3 corner, a good number 4 corner, which was what, in fairness to him, which is what the plan was when the Bengals brought him in. They wanted to keep Denard. They had Kirkpatrick. They had Jackson. And then they wanted to bring in Webb as kind of the 4th guy and throw a lot of defensive backs out there. Well, Kirkpatrick's been injured. Denard was out at the beginning of the year. Jackson missed some time. So Webb all of a sudden has kind of been a starting guy on the outside, and that hasn't worked out well. You saw today, he, penalties and let up a touchdown and got turned around by Julian Edelman in the first half. I mean, just it's not a good sign there. So he has not played that well. We know the issues at linebacker, but if you look at the Pro Football Focus metrics, linebacker play, at least from Vigil and Pratt, have actually increased over the past couple in terms of their effectiveness. They have increased. And really, things were fine at the beginning of this game until the turnovers started hitting. This game was manageable. This game was winnable. And the turnovers hit. The defense has kept the team in games. They're not good against the run. They have their issues. Like you said, the back seven are not playing all that great, but more often than not, they have kept points. They have kept the damage to a point where the team can catch up and if they need to, and potentially win a game. We've talked about the multiple, I think it's 7 or 8 now, 1 possession games this year. I mean, and at some point, yeah, it stinks to give up 20 points, 30 points, but at some point, this Zach Taylor offense, this Andy Dalton-led offense has to score more than 13 points. They have to score more than 19 points. They have to score more than 20 points. They just have to. We can hate on the defense, and there's a lot to not like there. There's a lot to dislike on the defensive side of the ball, but capable offense keeps you in these games, wins you more games. And this team is not doing it now. Bendino Galderio says, I don't know why anyone is calling out anyone besides Andy Dalton. Yeah, 4 interceptions. One of them being a pick 6. I mean, it's just you can't get past that. You can't win when your quarterback plays like that. And these aren't the drop passes across the middle that are 50-50 balls that bounce up and those unlucky interceptions. These were poor throws. These were predictable throws. They're just inexcusable. Now, here's the issue with, a lot of people are saying Burrow, and that's the way the Bengals should go based on how Burrow played in college, how Andy Dalton's been playing. That is the way the Bengals should go if they hold the number 1 overall pick. The thing is with him, the one question with him is the arm strength. It's probably above average. But see what he does, that it's probably honestly on par with, if not maybe a tiny bit stronger than Andy Dalton's. It's above average, but it's not an elite arm. It's not an Aaron Rodgers arm. But what he does is he well times his passes. When he throws the deep ball, he knows when to release the ball, not hang on to it that nanosecond further. That allows a defensive back to break on it. What he does is he navigates the pocket, allows guys to get an extra step to get open instead of forcing throws into covered areas. He does have a high level of accuracy. Obviously, I think he's at 78%, which is crazy for completion percentage this year. So those are the type of things Burrow does that Andy Dalton does not do. And frankly, not a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL do. So while his arm strength is not Aaron Rodgers-esque, what he does do is he is able to get the ball at spots and throw it at the right time in his drop so that these balls can be completed. And, you saw today a lot of the throws that were interceptions were late we're behind guys, and that's just not what you need out of your quarterback. I don't know what else to tell you guys. I'll say this here just to kind of give you a little bit of a box score courtesy of NFL.com here, kind of show you some of the tail of the tape, if you will. So some statistics here. I mean, you see Brady, you see the 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but 15 of 29 for 128 yards. Does that blow your hair back? I mean, I don't. Sony Michel, workman-like day, 89 yards on 19 carries. A lot of that was at the end. Burkhead had the touchdown, the big touchdown at the end, but that, that's garbage time stuff. They did a little stuff on some trickery with N'Keal Harry and whatnot. I mean, this is a game a capable team and a capable offense wins. No sacks by any defensive player. And then you see the two interceptions from Stephon Gilmore and 2 from J.C. Jackson. So, we can hate on the back 7 of the Bengals. We can hate on the run defense, and there's reason for it. But when Tom Brady throws for just over 50% and 128 yards in a game, 9 times out of 10, you win that game. Andy Dalton, 17 of 31, 151 yards. The 1 touchdown to Ethan Carter at the beginning of the game, and then the 4 touchdowns later. You see Joe Mixon with a great basically 5.5 yards per carry. Same thing for Gio Bernard, 5 carries, 27 yards. Good day for him. He was able to make some plays today. Tyler Eifert, 44, and then just kind of a lot of blah in terms of the receivers. Tough day for Tyler Boyd. He was targeted 7 times, only 3 catches, and 2 of those turned into interceptions. So, you got to look at that. Joe Mixon, I mentioned, 20 yards on 3 receptions. Gio Bernard, 10 yards on 2 receptions. So, that's that. I thought the pass rush was pretty good today, as I mentioned. Carlos Dunlap and Sam Hubbard both had sacks. Carl Lawson had a number of pressures, a lot of knockdowns of Tom Brady in the first half. So good stuff there. Randy Bullock, 2 of 2 on field goals. He actually hit a 48-yarder, so a little bit longer for him. Decent day for him in the cold there. And then, not much to write home about in terms of the return game there. And then just kind of some more tail of the tape. Cincinnati had more yards than New England. They had more passing yards than New England, 151 to 116 in the passing yards department. New England had a slightly more rushing yards, which is a little surprising, but I think, again, a lot of that was garbage time stuff. 175 to 164, not a big deal there. Average yards per play, Cincinnati had the edge there. Points scored, obviously. Fumbles lost, obviously, in favor of New England. Interception, most obviously, in favor of the Patriots. 2 sacks. Third down efficiency, 42% by New England as opposed to 30%. That's an area where Dalton and Taylor, they got to own that too. Both those guys, they got to own that third down efficiency. It has not been good this year, nor has the red zone offense efficiency of late. That has not been good. Again, the Bengals remain one of the least penalized teams in the NFL. Coming into last week's game, they were the least penalized, but they had 8 last week. They had 5 today. That's not killing you. Cincinnati had the ball more. They're just not putting up points, and they're turning the ball over. So, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, that's they owned a lot of the categories, and the ones that the Patriots did seemed to be kind of either garbage time stuff or stuff that they were just taking advantage of the Bengals' mistakes. And it is what it is. The Bengals have a lot of hard decisions to make this next offseason, but probably the easiest they need to make is if they hang on to that number 1 overall pick is to draft Joe Burrow. That's just, today kind of sealed it. And if there are those who still support Andy Dalton ardently, especially after today, especially after the playoff performances and all of that in his career, I mean, I don't like to pile on the guy, but what can you say? If you watch the game today, every single one of those interceptions was a poor throw. Every single one of them. And, The one thing about Burrow that I like, and I think that the Bengals should like, yeah, he's accurate. I mentioned that. Yeah, he's got the big time stats, but he's come to play in the big games this year. Now he's got one, if not two, big games coming up here with the playoff, the college playoff here against good teams. But in their biggest game against Alabama, showed up big. Other big games throughout the year and throughout the SEC, he has shown up big, and that's the clutch gene, and you need that out of your quarterback. Ironically, a lot of people are thinking Burrow, because of the arm, the above average arm strength, not elite, but his ability to navigate the pocket, his build, his style of play, his leadership. A lot of people think he looks like number 12, who was on the other sideline against the Bengals today. Lofty expectations. I don't know if he's even going to come close to that, but you may want to roll the dice on a guy like that if you think he can come anywhere close. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate you joining us live. And sorry, it's a little later than usual in terms of when I took the air, but had some things come up and, had to take the air a little later than usual. But appreciate you tuning in. Again, you can get this show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. You can get it on Megaphone. You can get it on iHeartRadio, YouTube, and CincyJungle.com. Get the other podcasts within the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, part of the SB Nation family of podcasts. So check all that stuff out. Keep it to CincyJungle.com for all your news, opinions, notes, analysis, breaking news, all that stuff. And hey, NFL draft stuff, as that's coming up in a few months. So check that out there too. We'll be continuing to bring you content as the year comes to a close and through the off season. So definitely keep attuned to us. We're going to keep bringing you content. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks for all the support. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. Have a good one.